All right, and we are live. And oh, I just realized that I didn't mute my YouTube, so that's probably going to come in here in a second. I know there's like what, like a 15-second delay or something like that when it comes to the
Yeah.
something like that. I don't know. Let me refresh that and pause. There we go. There. Now I don't have to worry about that pumping it on me. Okay, so welcome everybody who is going to join us or who will view this into the future. This is Let's Have a Chat with Big Lundy. My first guest in quite some time is a guy who I know from Facebook and very little else, actually. Dan
Yep.
here, and he is here so that we can talk
Duerst,
to each other, and we can jab at each other and fuck with each other and do the normal things that people do. What's going on?
Yeah, sounds cool, man.
So what's been going on with you the past, like, I don't know, week or so?
Excuse me?
What's been going on with you for the past like week or so? Have you
Not shit. I've just been kind of like looking at some of these recent news stories. They're probably fairly, I don't know, innocuous, but I don't know. Like, you ever heard of the Zarna Joshi thing? The humongous.
I've got the humongous thing. Yeah. I've seen that.
You there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
See that shit. She is actually. Yeah. You're still cutting out a little bit.
Ugh.
She is actually. You can hear me? Can you hear me and everything?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. I don't know if anybody else is watching and they can't hear you or what's going on. I know I can hear you just fine. I don't know what's been going on with me. For those who are watching, I already lowered my bandwidth all the way down. I don't know what else to do.
Okay, you were good just there. Sweet. Let's just roll with that. She's been releasing a series of videos sort of like justifying the whole thing, which basically amounted to her walking up to a dude, asking, "What's your name?" He responded with a cheesy fucking dad joke, you know, like a really bad, cheesy play on words, referring to himself as humongous. And now she's basically releasing a bunch of videos attributing that interaction to the white, cis, het, male, patriarchal system of oppression, and basically saying that any woman who denies that that is what took place is experiencing internalized oppression and all that good stuff.
This is something that
I guess that's sort of.
I've seen this a lot, wherein, like, okay, so she goes up to a dude, he gives her a bad joke that is sort of like him talking about, I don't know, his dick size. I think that's the implication that anybody can reasonably come to. And she goes, this is misogyny, this is cis normative, heteronormative, blah 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 blah.
I mean, wasn't his dick though. Like, it was like, he's a big guy. I think that was more so, and it was just like a Simpsons kind of joke, or like, you know, she read into him talking about his dick when I don't think that that's what he was doing.
I don't think either of us were there, so we can't really say for sure. But to me, this is sort of like beyond the point, because I don't agree with what she's doing, regardless of whether or not he was referring to his dick or not. It doesn't matter to me. If you're going to say that anybody who doesn't agree with you that this is some sort of like oppression towards me or some sort of expression of a higher societal problem, if you don't agree with this, then you're a part of the problem, blah, 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 blah. This isn't helping anything. You're not, like, there's this thing that a lot of people have sort of like fucked off on when it comes to normal conversations, where nobody gets this idea of proportionality. Like, is this something that like nobody gets anymore? Like, I think this is a problem that's sort of been introduced by regular contact on the internet, and people sort of like not having the ability to distance themselves from internet interactions to normal everyday interactions. Like, if he were to have gone up to her and instigated the conversation and been like, "Hey," and like, I don't know, cornered her in some way and went, "So you want to know my name? It's humongous," and maybe did some like thrust shit. Like, if that would have happened, I would have been like, sure, yeah, that's clearly inappropriate behavior, and that's clearly wrong, and that's clearly something that is something that, you know, she might not be the only person to experience that on a regular basis. So maybe in that instance, I'd be like, yeah, sure, that's bad. But like, if she's going up to somebody else and saying, hey, what's your name? And he's just like, ha, humongous, get it? Wink, wink, nod, nod, waka, waka. Like, that to me, like, sure, it's a bad joke, but who cares? Like, I understand how.
Yeah, and he's also under no. Sorry, what was that?
No, go ahead.
And also, like, I don't know if this is relevant. He's under no obligation to tell her what the fuck his real name is anyway, you know. And so, because this is just some random fucking person coming up to him with a fucking camera phone, harassing him, but essentially turning around and promulgating this narrative that she was the victim, she was the harassed, and now give me $1,000. Literally, she's asking for $1,000 now, and she's up to, like, I think 400, which is just, just blows my fucking mind, man.
The thing is for like, well, I'm gonna keep saying the thing is a lot because that's just how I normally speak.
That's cool.
A multitude.
Tell me about the thing.
But one of the things that's kind of like annoying me about this is that this Zarna Joshi, or Joshi, however you pronounce that name, is that I don't think this is the first person that she's accused of having like this issue. Of being like some sort of harasser because of some small thing, and to be honest, like, the internet doesn't help when it comes to these issues, because the fact that she can just make a video and just send it out being like, look at this, and then a billion people react to it, and they're going to have a reaction one way or the other, and they feel like they have to take a side for some strange reason. Everybody has to immediately take a side when they see a video of something happening, regardless of the fact that nobody was there, nobody knows the context of what actually happened, and that all we're going to get is one side of the conversation from one person or the other. Like, you can talk to Hugh, or whatever his name is. I don't really know what his name is. But you can talk to him and ask him what his version of events are, and he'll give his version of events. And then you can talk to her and ask her what her version of events are, and then she'll give her version of events. And then we have to basically just make a decision. Like, why do we have to make a judgmental decision on how we feel about this particular issue, given very insufficient reason to believe that we have the full story one way or the other? It doesn't really make any sense to me.
Well, did you I mean, you watched the video, like the original humongous video, right?
Yeah.
You there?
Yeah. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Did you watch that video, or?
Yeah. As far as I'm aware, this was during a protest, right?
It was a part of some, like, I believe, pro-cop thing, and the guy that she was accosting was pro-cop, I think, because certain individual police officers helped get his daughter off of drugs, if I'm not mistaken. And so, I mean, I don't know. From watching that video, I don't really see how you couldn't get the full context, because she walks up, demands to know what his name is. He makes a stupid joke. She interprets it the wrong way, starts yelling sexual harassment. A couple people in the crowd gasp, like, there's a literal gasp, like, oh, like, he sexually harassed you, you know. And it was an immediate knee jerk, at least on the part of the people that she was associated with, the people who her cause, which I guess I could assume it's like a Black Lives Matter related message of some sort. Or SJW. I know you don't like that term, but which that's something we could touch on if you like.
I mean, I guess,
but I'm kind of rambling now. Sorry.
Like, okay, this is kind of going off of the original, but like, when someone says when someone says like the terminology of SJW, my mind sort of shuts off, because I don't know. Like, I can get a vague understanding of what's being referred to when someone says it, but I don't really know what's being referred to, nor does it seem to me it's just a pejorative of people who say things on the left that seem too extreme to whoever is saying the word SJW. Like, that's the best I can
my understanding of what it means is basically anyone who, in the name of social justice issues, goes around doing nefarious or duplicitous or self-righteous, selfish, self-serving things. And basically, I support a lot of what I would consider social justice issues. Like, I don't like the fact that our prisons are all overcrowded. I don't like the fact that we bombed like 9 fucking countries since Obama's been elected. I don't like the fact that we have an extremely profit-driven criminal justice system. I don't like the fact, that the drug war ties into that shit. All that shit, right? The list goes on. You could probably pin me as a fucking progressive flaming lefty on a lot of fucking issues, but what I would identify a social justice warrior as is someone whose actions are hurting those causes in a way, which still might be too vague and nebulous for you to accept, but
yeah, I mean, I don't really know what would count as that. I mean, I can say, all right, so I think we can agree on some extremes here. Like, if we come across like somebody who's ranting and raving all over their social media about how the word "to" with two O's in it is like patriarchy, misogyny, sexist, whatever, then I think we can agree that's probably the extreme where we can both agree that's probably what people are probably referring to when they say SJW. Oh, yeah. But then we get to this other extreme wherein like Sargon of Akkad of all fucking people is called an SJW people. It's like there's the spectrum in which the word is used is so incredibly broad as to be applied to anybody, and any one person can have their own particular like stream of people that they're particularly referring to. But when it comes to like the internet at large, which is almost the only place that you find this term anymore, or really ever, is it's so widely applicable that I can't really get my mind around the word. I mean, it seems like such a useless word to me. Like, maybe instead of saying SJW, like what you're referring to, maybe you could say like leftist extremists.
Sure, like maybe I see where you're coming from. Like SJW might as well just be like libtard, right?
Yeah, basically, it might as well be. And but even then, like, it's so insane because so many people on the internet have no idea what sort of even constitutes that. Because you have, again, this goes back to Sargon of Akkad. He was called a fucking Marxist of all things. I don't know how.
Who the fuck is deluded enough to call that guy a Marxist?
Somebody with like tens of thousands of subscribers who all agree with him and think that Sargon is some sort of like next coming of Stalin. I don't know. It's I don't get it.
That's great. No, Sargon is interesting because like he's something that I don't know. I've noticed this pattern. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. Of YouTubers who self-identify as liberal, right?
Yeah.
But pretty much every goddamn thing they say is a boon to the right wing.
Yeah. Which isn't just like to sort of compound.
Like Sargon counts as that. I'd say if you've heard of Dave Rubin, he's kind of like that. Let's see, the Skag 3, that guy. I can name drop a couple more people probably, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and to be honest, like when they get accused of being very like right wing in the way in which they view things, like for instance Sargon, I would say Sargon is right wing. He would disagree with me on this, and he would ask me, well, what do you think is so right wing about me? And I would say, well, your reliance on the free market economy and the fact that you believe in its overall efficiency over any other form of governance, laissez-faire agreements, and wanting to go towards that. These are very conservative views.
The left-right dichotomy or false dichotomy has been so fucking fucked up in America, especially, where it's like like being in favor of gay marriage gets you called a left-winger when that doesn't really have anything to do with left or right.
Which is
or like wanting to legalize weed makes you left-wing, but that again has nothing to do with left or right.
It's completely nonsensical because you can totally be right-wing and want to legalize weed. I mean, it's right wing and left wing has become as nebulous as the term SJW to me. I don't know what it means anymore because everybody thinks that everybody else is a part of some leftist or rightist propaganda machine, and nobody knows what the hell they're referring to anymore. Like, if we've gotten to the point where Sargon can be called a Marxist and and Bernie Sanders can be called a fucking communist, then we don't know. Then words don't mean anything anymore. Like, these words are just insults. I think that's the main issue, is because these words have become insults. That's where the disconnect starts, because you start disagreeing with someone and that makes you want to insult them. And so the first insult that you come up with is some sort of political position that you think is just fundamentally absurd. So you start calling them whatever that is. But this is something that I think we would all be very beneficial to move away from, is to use people's political positions as a pejorative. Because the more we do that, the more we start grouping everyone together into these terms to the point where they don't mean anything.
Yeah, it's kind of like I guess a thought terminating cliche in a way, like you leftist or you right wing douchebag, you know. But see, I think I watched your big long rambly video that you put up a couple times actually, and I think you touched upon something where you were talking about people who use all the right words, but their values suck, right? I think that's the gist of what you were talking about.
Yeah.
As opposed to people who use words that suck, but their hearts are in the right place. I think in a lot of ways, an SJW could be someone who has all the right vernacular, all the right academic jargon, all the right words, as you put it, but their inner intentions are just shit, right?
Possibly.
You know what I mean?
The thing is, like, I think everyone's intentions, like when you actually ask somebody what their intentions are, everyone will tell you that their intentions is the goodness of everybody. Like, everyone likes to believe that they're the ones who believe whatever it is that's necessary in order to bring all of society to like a natural fruition state, right? Everyone wants to build this sort of utopia, and they believe that their way of doing it is the best way to do it. And yet we have diametrically opposed views as to how that's going to be accomplished. And like, so the problem here is that everybody seems to be under the impression that they know more than they do. And the internet does not help with that at all.
You're breaking up. You're still breaking up a lot, yo. Shit. Maybe you're too close to the mic or something. Maybe that's it.
I have it like a little bit of ways from me. It's like 2 feet away.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Shit. Well, I can still get the gist of what you're saying. So you just don't accept. I guess I can totally see where you're coming from. It's just I just encountered so many people that would fit that description. Like, not even just online, but in real life. It's a lot of the virtue signaling and you know. But even online, are you familiar with when at UC Berkeley, when some, you know, LGBT activists and Black Lives Matter activists like formed a human chain and were literally like blocking white students from attending class. And this was because from what I understand, it was because they moved the safe space from like one room, like room 5F or whatever, down into the basement. And that was like a huge fucking deal. Like, they were lol triggered, whatever, but that would be a prime example of what a social justice warrior would be, is like someone who thinks they're, you know, fighting for this overarching sense of justice, but what they're really doing in effect is like their prescriptions for that problem that they see are just really fucking shitty and don't do anything. In fact, what they probably really do is just give right-wing dipshits like Bill O'Reilly more ammunition to talk shit about anyone who, for instance, wants to reform the police or criminal justice system, which I find to be a big substantive issue.
I'll say this: there's nothing we can do about that much. Like, there's always going to be idiots. Like, that's kind of, no offense to anybody who is attending college for their first year or their second year, but you're probably an idiot. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that to denigrate you. I'm not saying that because you're like less of a person or that you're not very well informed because you're young or whatever. I'm just going to say that because that seems to be the pattern, is that and I mean, have you ever heard the expression "a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing"? I think
A little bit of what?
a little bit of knowledge.
I'm sorry, you cut out. A little bit of what can be a dangerous thing?
A little bit of knowledge.
A little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I have heard something similar to that.
Well, another way to put it is that I know enough about subject X, whatever that is, to be dangerous. That's another way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. I think, on college campuses in particular, there are a lot of people who are overeducated on a lot of useless.
No, I wouldn't say it's overeducation. I would say it's undereducation that is viewed by the person who's talking about whatever it is, or who's doing some sort of activism about whatever it is, as viewing themselves to have been sufficiently educated, when as a matter of fact, they are still very much undereducated. I think that's something.
Sure. I mean, if you're just in your first year of college and you think you know everything, you're probably incorrect. But if you're any human being who thinks they know everything,
the big problem there is that's so many people. Like, that's so many people who go into college. Yep. And they get their first year and they're like, I'm ready to be a psychologist because I just took Psych 101 and I know what olfactory means. Like, that's sick.
Yeah, oh man. I had a psych teacher who was just unbelievably annoying. Like, and this is just a little fucking stupid nitpick, but they had this verbal tick where after every fucking sentence, they would end it with, all right. Mm-hmm. And I almost had to drop the class. I almost had to drop the class. In fact, like half of the people did. And I'm not sure if that was why, but it was really like patronizing. But I don't know. I'm digressing. Sorry. But college is definitely, it's more for networking, I would say, more so than getting woke, as it were. I don't know.
I think that college can serve as a good jumping off point. The problem is too many people see it as the end point. Like, because I attended like 2 to 4 years of college on one particular subject, whatever that is. Like, I have a business degree. Now I can talk about activism. Like that makes sense at all. Like it's sort of like whenever I see some dipshit on YouTube talking about economics in an authoritative way when all they have is like maybe a bachelor's in some sort of subset of economics. But now, even though there's like PhDs out there who are basically telling everybody nobody knows what the hell they're talking about when it comes to the subject, these guys who have been in college for 4 years and haven't even done a post-grad thing, haven't wrote a thesis, haven't done jack shit, just come on to YouTube and go, I know everything there is to know, and all you guys need to understand is that capitalism is the way of the Lord. And we get
I don't know why, but you made me think, Lundy, you made me think of my friends who identify as ANCAP.
Oh my God.
Have you
people so much. You know what? That's not fair. I don't hate them. I don't hate them, but like I get very annoyed by them very quickly because I've heard it all over and over and over and over again, and all of it makes no sense. Like everything that's extolled as like a virtue of capitalism in modern day America is a result of corporatism more than it is capitalism, and yet ANCAPs like to take credit for whatever capitalism in the United States creates, even though in the United States, it's all basically been corporatist for like over 100 years now. Like they'll
use the corporatist buzzword to dismiss that the notion that free market capitalism has ever even existed. That's what I find, is that they'll say, well, it's never been, a true free market because the government's involved in some way. But it's like, dude, the capitalists put the state in place to protect their interests in the first place.
Yeah.
So they're not complaining.
If we have capitalists who are the ones that have the most power for one particular reason, or they have the most resources, or they have the most people who are willing to kill for them, or whatever, we're just going to end up with an oligarchy one way or the other, regardless of what happens. We can go ahead and topple the government tonight, but there's so many people who are so very rich who can pay so very many people to do whatever they want, and they can just set up a new oligarchy like fucking next week. Like the notion that we can just dismantle the United States government and then capitalism will reign supreme without any sort of problems is nonsense because, this has to do with one of the core assumptions of the ANCAPs is that everybody who is, every business owner, every entrepreneur, all these people, they have rational self-interest and that they'll help each other because that will help everybody, which is just absolute nonsense. Like these guys don't fight on a regular basis and compete with each other and try to destroy each other. Like there isn't such a thing as sending in like spies from your company to another company to see what they're up to so that you can take whatever secrets that they have, or if you can get ahead of them on whatever game that you guys are playing. Like this never happens. Like companies don't basically hate other companies that take any sort of money from them. Like and the idea that they wouldn't put some sort of like authority in place to prevent other companies from being able to take over them, it's not a rational amount of self-interest. I will say that there's a lot of self-interest involved in being a business person and being very high up on the totem pole and being like, because you want to stay there. It's a natural human impulse to want to retain whatever power that you have, which is sort of why we have people who have quite literally said that any sort of increase to representation and political power to minorities today is a necessary taking away of any sort of power from like white dudes. I don't know.
That's interesting. That is obviously a stupid argument that they would make, but let's see, jumping from subject to subject, but the representation thing. What would you like to see as far as representation in the government exactly?
What's up?
Did you hear me? I'm sorry. Am I cutting out?
I caught most of it, but not all of it.
Okay, so would you like to see a more equitable representation of different minorities in in Congress and governors' mansions and et cetera, et cetera? Is that?
Well, yeah, like for
instance, what you.
Like for instance, I don't know what's the Latino population's demographic in the United States. I think it's like 26%, something like that. Last time I checked.
So you'd want that to be like reflected in the amount of representatives that there are in the government, basically.
I would like to encourage that to be the case. I mean, I've had this argument with Vernaculus in the past, and he's
I watched that actually. I'm actually like a fan of all you guys, even like Zenistrad too. Like I watched all you guys for a little bit here.
Well, I mean,
I guess the implication seems to be like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the implication for the left on this is that if you don't share a skin tone or genitals, you are less equipped to represent that group's interests.
No, I would say if you don't participate.
Is that sort of?
I would say if you don't participate in the sort of. If you don't share a culture with a group, you're likely to not take that culture's like interests into account when you make any one given decision.
Well, that sort of I guess that sort of implies like this notion of like a universal lived experience, I guess. And I would hesitate.
No, I would fundamentally reject a
believe in something like that.
I would fundamentally object to a universally lived experience. There's no such thing.
Yeah, I would agree, but doesn't this amount of people from this group represent the population, so we should have exact proportionately in the government.
This is something that a lot of people misunderstood when I was addressing Vernaculus, including him, is that I'm not sitting here saying that I don't really care what the beliefs or what the lifestyle or what anything is of a particular group. I just want that group to be represented in skin tone or genitalia. Like, people didn't really get that that's not what I was saying. What I was saying is that there needs to be equal representation of that group. And that representation can come in a variety of factors. And it is true that a guy might be able to represent women better than a particular woman. Like Michelle Bachmann is probably not a very good representative of women's rights, whereas Bernie Sanders might be. I can totally see that as being the case. But then we have this other problem.
But then the problem is that, the problem is that a shitload of women, in fact, did vote for Michelle Bachmann, unfortunately, in my opinion.
Well, yeah.
I don't
agree with that.
I guess, yeah, that was Vernaculous's argument. I think that was Vernaculous's argument when he said that, you know, Michelle Bachmann is representing those people, those conservative women who voted for her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think that Vernaculous's main issue, or rather error there, in from my viewpoint, is the fact that he's sort of assuming that because you voted for a particular person, that means that that person represents what you want to be the case. There's a lot of people in this election in particular who are going to be voting for Trump or Hillary or Stein or Johnson or whatever, who probably don't agree with most of the things that they say, but they just don't have very many chances at somebody else. So that's just what they have to go for. I don't want to elect any of these people, but unfortunately, those are our choices. And there's not a whole lot left I can do that's going to actually be effective. So there's that error there, that because Michelle Bachmann was voted for, that means that these women who voted for her believe that she is the best representative of women's issues, which isn't the case. Many women might say that they give no shits about women's issues. I've seen women say that the right to vote should be taken away from women. I've seen women say that women shouldn't have jobs. There are women who act against the interest of women's rights all the time. So that's another issue there. And then there's yet another issue wherein he's going by the very literal definition of a representative, where if somebody is elected as a representative, that means that they are necessarily representing you, which in this particular sort of strange government we have that is so very much tied into how much money any one particular candidate gets, be it Senate or state representative, president, even going all the way down to like mayoral candidacy. If you have the most money being thrown at you, you're likely the person who's going to get elected. It doesn't really matter what your positions are. That's just been the way that elections have worked for years and years and years. There's very few instances of the inverse happening, that the person who gets the least amount of money is able to get elected. So this idea that like stances and beliefs and platforms are what gets people elected is just not even kind of true. So there's yet another issue with that.
But I mean, the thing is from what I understand, and I would, this is a head scratcher for me. A lot of the anti-choice activists, in fact, are women. So it could be reasonably inferred that if those people vote for a Michelle Bachmann type character representing, they would perceive as women's interests, because they, you know, they believe for whatever the fuck reason that a fetus, like a female fetus, potential female fetus, is a life, and you know that's a person, and you'd be killing that person if you. So would it not be reasonable to infer that Michelle Bachmann represents those particular women's interests? And that, as far as concerned,
if the argument is that women who are anti-choice or pro-life, however you want to phrase that, doesn't really matter too terribly much to me, and that she is also pro-life, and that therefore she is representing those interests, then I suppose there's merit to that. But then I have to get to this idea of can the interests of an individual be self-flagellation to a certain degree? I don't know what a better term for that would be, but like, can they work against their own interests using their interests? Is there such a thing as people who are against their better interests because they've been misled for some reason, or they come to an incorrect conclusion to some degree? Like, and this is another sort of like argument that I got into with Vernaculus, because he believed that it was very arrogant of me to say that any one person is wrong for having a particular political position, which I thought was very strange of him to say, because obviously he believes the same thing about many people's political positions. So there's that. Yeah. But the idea that people can work against their own interests is something that happens a lot. Like, and we don't even have to go to like minorities or women or anything like that. We can go to your average straight white working male. Your average straight white working male is very likely to vote for people who have no interest in actually promoting their interests. your average straight white working male is probably better off voting for a candidate like Bernie Sanders, for instance. But they're much more likely to vote for a candidate like Donald Trump instead, or Ted Cruz, or any other.
Scott Walker. Scott Walker in my state, who's been a fucking nightmare. Actually, like at the beginning of the primary, he was leading in the polls, which gave me nightmares, actually. Like, that guy has been the most, like, anti-worker fucking governor pretty much ever. Which, but, you know, yeah, I can see what you're saying, but I don't know. I've gotten into a lot of trouble sort of saying, like, well, you know, self-flagellation, what you were saying, like, essentially a self-loather, or like a, you know, and then some people on the left, in a very misguided fashion, will refer to black conservatives as coons or Uncle Toms and shit like that, and that is just fucking dumb.
You know, if some black liberals want to call like black conservatives, like whatever they want to call them, that's not my fight. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to touch that with a 20-foot fucking pole. That's not my thing. I don't understand it, and I don't pretend to understand it, and I'm not gonna. So I just don't even bother.
Well, but I mean, didn't you just say that like an anti-choice woman is like self-flagellating in a way?
I don't.
I guess I would agree with that to an extent, but you know,
I guess it's just because I don't have a better word for it right now in my head. Basically, I don't feel it's all that unreasonable to say that there are people who think that somebody's going to be good for them in government and then be wrong about it. I don't think that's a very unreasonable or like extreme position or an arrogant position. I don't really think it's all that arrogant. Like, people can be wrong about who's going to be best to represent them in government. And in fact, I think people very much are wrong many times. And I think anybody who discusses politics in general, or any election in general, be it a presidential election or a representative election or a senatorial race or anything along these lines, I think everyone agrees with that idea, because otherwise, why would we be arguing over who the best candidate is? Like, the idea that we can't say that other people are wrong about who would be best to represent them is nonsense, because we do it every day, every like hour of every day. It happens all the time. So I don't know. I don't buy this idea that I'm wrong for saying that other people can be wrong about who would best represent them. I think this idea of someone who represents you being like a good thing because they agree with you on like one thing or two things, or even if they agree with you but you're wrong about what would best suit you, like cutting taxes on the rich, for instance. How does that serve anybody other than the rich? It doesn't at all. And yet it's a very popular idea.
That blows my mind when fucking middle class, like my entire family leans to the right, and they, well, I guess they frame it in a way that's like, well, I don't want to be selfish and covet what my neighbor has. Like, I guess it comes from a really like sort of Catholic, conservative Christian mindset where they don't necessarily see the implications of a select few amount of elites hoarding most of the cash. You know, they don't see how that basically fucks over, you know, like a solid sixth of the working class and like the gigantic chunk of fucking homeless people we have, you know, because I guess they would agree, they would believe in what you just, you know, the free market theory, right?
Yeah.
You know, things of that nature. So I guess, I don't know. I guess
I get that it's very inflammatory for me to refer to the free market theory as I do, but I just don't know what other way to put it. It's an unjustified assumption that people make as to the efficiency, as to like some sort of unrealistic and unproven and undemonstrated efficiency of the free market to accomplish whatever they think it's supposed to accomplish. Like, I had this argument with Sargon on his channel once, well, on his live stream channel anyway, where I pointed out that one of the most common arguments I see that tries to say that it's impossible for a wage gap to exist is that if business owners were able to pay women less and get away with it, then they would only hire women. And on the surface, if you don't think about this at all, like if you don't even kind of examine it, on the surface, it makes sense if you accept those two premises and you don't even try to challenge them. But as soon as you start challenging them,
It basically starts with the presumption that it starts with the presumption that a business person is going to do that which nets them the most profit, which is not true all the time.
It's not true a decent amount of time on a micro scale. And when we're talking about people being hired and like workers being paid, that's a microeconomic scale. And and businesses get economics fucked up all the goddamn time. Macroeconomics businesses are actually.
But I think what I wanted to say about the wage gap thing is I think it's actually kind of harmful that I guess you could describe them as pop feminists or whatever the fuck you want, which just like SJW, like, is that even really a thing? I mean, but anyway, they promulgate this notion that, you know, basically if you're a woman in the workplace, you're going to have like a quarter of your earnings robbed from you by the evil white male cis het patriarchal shitlords, which is just like,
I mean, there's a lot of like misleading stuff about that. Like I've had, again, this is a part of the conversation that I had with Sargon. Like I don't know, it's probably been 2 years at this point. If anybody wants to go back and try and find it, but something that I pointed out is that when any study tries to actually examine this and try and control for any factor that they can find that might explain it without discrimination being a thing to examine, then we get to the point nobody's been able to actually close the gap. Even biased sources like right-wing think tanks like Liberty University sponsored stuff, they're still not able to close it, even when they're actually not even examining things in any way a correct way. But to say that like that everything is due to discrimination doesn't help either, because that's obviously not true. It's so much more complicated than most people like to give it credit for. That's why I'm always pissed off whenever anybody says the 77% number and tries to use that as like the pure discriminatory factor. Like that's wrong. And anybody who says that the wage gap is a total fucking myth and it doesn't exist whatsoever, that's fucking wrong. Like I'm annoyed by both of those, because what it does is it oversimplifies a real problem that exists in the United States in a variety of different ways. Because the discriminatory pay, we can see that in resume studies. Like I pointed this out to Sargon, I gave him a couple, and he said, well, I can accept that there is discriminatory pay to some degree for a few places. Basically any place that this resume study was done, which I thought was kind of interesting of him to say, like, okay, so any place that this study was done, I will agree that it exists there to some degree, but I won't accept that it exists anywhere else in the United States, which I thought was weird because it happened in like, these studies have been done in like 4 different spots all over the United States, from the north to the east to the south to the west, everywhere. California, fucking Michigan, fucking New York, fucking Maine, fucking Florida. It's been done all over the place, and they find this very consistent. But he's like, oh, I don't accept that it happens in any substantial way other than those very specific spots. And it's like, whatever. But beyond that, so we know that there is some level of discriminatory pay going on. That's something that we can come to the conclusion on, not based off of the actual wage gap studies themselves, because they aren't able to actually narrow it down to that, but because of other studies that actively look for some sort of discrimination in pay. Like when you get called and you get offered this amount of money versus when other people get called and they get offered this amount of money. And it gets more complicated when you don't even just look at it from on a gender divide, but you also look at it on a racial divide as well. Because black men also get offered less money and get hired less than white dudes. Latino women get hired less and paid less than white women. Like this happens across the spectrum very reliably with these resume studies, but nobody talks about that. They only talk about women and men, and whether or not that wage gap is in any way existent, which I think is very hurtful to actually figuring out what the issue is and how to solve it. And this oversimplification happens on a variety of different levels too. Like everybody who thinks that this wage gap is just a bunch of like white dudes around a table in a cabal wearing robes going, we're not going to pay women as much just to fuck with them. Like that's apparently what people are going on. But no one believes that.
To a huge extent, that is what is being like put forth by feminists, though. Like, could you at least admit that it is like,
I've never seen
these
that.
evil white male patriarchs who just fucking hate women, and
I mean, I know,
and it may just be like some people are saying like, well, some people refer to this idea of like an implicit bias, though, which that might be more of a productive way to talk about
Oh,
it, because
that's been the way I've seen it talked about mostly when it comes to the wage gap. I mean, if they talk about it at all, like if anybody goes beyond the 77% stuff, if anybody goes beyond that and they start getting a little bit more nuanced in their discussion, then the idea of implicit bias comes in very. I see it all the time. This idea that there's actually like a cabal conspiracy of dudes just trying to keep the woman down is not something I've seen all that much. I've seen people who are anti-feminists put that forward as the idea that is being expressed in their mind, in their interpretation of what it is. But I haven't actually seen that as an actual expressed idea by feminists in general. I
know this is anecdotal, but I've had feminists like tell me that I personally will make more money than women because of that average, which is I mean, it's this inability. A lot of times, it's this inability to differentiate between, you know, the individual and the collective, right? So it's like, you know, this sociological statistic exists and shows what we could argue is this certain reality. So therefore, you as an individual who happen to be a member of this group automatically are the beneficiary of some sort of illicit or whatever, which is debatable. It's as if people talk about it like the way you would talk about climate change. Like if you deny this, you are just anti-reality in a way. But I think the jury's still out on this concept. It's still up for fucking debate in a way, in my opinion. So,
well, as far as climate change is concerned, I know that's something that pretty much like the vast majority of scientists have been in consensus for like a long time now. They're like the idea of anthropomorphic climate change.
No, I agree. It's settled. What I'm saying is like people act like denying male privilege is tantamount to denying that climate change is a thing. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't say that it's tantamount to denying that climate change is a thing, but I think that everyone recognizes that there is some sort of privilege. I mean, not necessarily male privilege, not necessarily white privilege, but everyone sort of gets the idea of privilege. Like nobody looks at somebody who is a fucking billionaire and was born a billionaire and says, no, that person has no privilege whatsoever. Their life is exactly equal to mine. Nobody says that. Everyone accepts the idea of rich privilege. That's something that nobody really has an issue challenging.
Except Trey Melvin. You know who Trey Melvin is?
No.
Yellow?
No, I don't know who Trey Melvin is.
Oh, well, he's a fairly prominent YouTuber. He's a black gentleman, Black Lives Matter supporter. He's got like 3 million subscribers or something. He's got like a YouTube Red zombie TV show that he's doing. He got into a spat with the other YouTuber, Jeff Holiday, who you may be familiar with. Maybe not.
I know Jeff. Yeah.
Which he's a little iffy. I don't know, but anyway, Trey Melvin basically did in fact argue that a white cisgendered homeless man is still more privileged than Trey Melvin, who is a millionaire living in a mansion, essentially. Which
I think that's very misguided. I think that it's accurate to a degree, but it's not like the implication is incorrect. The idea that so
more the more privileged thing. Would you say that that's sort of misguided? Because
that's wrong. There is like some privileges that are enjoyed by white people, regardless of who you are. That sort of spans the entirety of like our ethnicity, like in comparison to others, because the whole idea of privilege is all else being equal, this is not equal. Like if you're a white dude walking down the street, it's very unlikely that you're going to be viewed the same way that a black dude walking down the street is. Now this might change given other factors, like if you're a white dude walking down the street in a hoodie with baggy jeans versus a black dude walking down the street in a suit and a tie and a briefcase. These things are going to change, but these also have to do with a class divide as well. This is why I kind of like intersectional feminism way more than I do like any other sort, because it takes this into account. It understands that it's not just black and white and Latino and blah. It's not just man and woman and blah. It's not just like cis versus trans and blah. It's a wide variety of factors, all of which need to be taken into account in order for us to actually understand what's going on. Like a white man might like.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, like if you took a, you know, like a white guy with dreadlocks and like maybe like a Grateful Dead t-shirt and a Mystery Machine van, you know, with like weed smoke pouring out of the windows, like he would probably get profiled by the cops more so than, you know, your Trey Melvins of the world. And so like, so is there some sort of like,
I don't know.
Is there some sort of like,
that's a bit more blurry. I don't know how Trey Melvin usually like carries himself. I don't know.
What's that?
That's a bit more blurry because I don't really know how like Trey Melvin carries himself. I don't know how he normally dresses. I don't know how he normally acts because it has less to do with. Okay.
He's a millionaire. I mean,
well, being a millionaire doesn't mean that you won't be fucked with by the police. I mean, there have been black senators and judges that have been fucked with by the police because they didn't know. I mean, it really doesn't. That doesn't matter that much when it comes to like harassment by like police or even assumptions made by other people. Because I think this is another thing that's really difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around because it's not something that's very easy to demonstrate unless everyone is just honest with themselves. Like, I don't know if you've seen the show Avenue Q. They have a song in it called "Everyone's a Little Bit Racist," and that song couldn't be more accurate. And yet, and most people, when they hear the song, they're like, yeah, that's pretty much the case. But if it's said in any other context, this starts to become something that people distance themselves from. I think that.
So do you? I mean, do you like? I remember we got into a spat on fucking Facebook about the guy, the teacher who fucking basically was on camera saying to be white is to be racist, and you were basically. What it seemed like to me is that you were rationalizing that statement by saying that technically everyone is a little bit racist, which
I said that technically everyone is a little bit racist, or at the very least they have racial bias. We can quibble over whether or not the word racist is actually applicable when we're talking about that level of like bias. And that's a valid conversation to have. I don't really know one way or the other if that's a valid word to use, but it is a word that is used by academics to some degree. I don't know. And what I said was because of the academic understanding of the word racist, only white people are capable of being racist because we have the power, at least in the United States. Other places it changes depending on who has the most like political and economic power. Like I can agree that the idea of saying that to be white is to be racist is a very like inflammatory statement, and that a lot of people can get the wrong implication from that very easily if it's not explained to them in a very controlled setting. But I think that
I don't think that really opens up too many conversations, though. I think that's just,
if
I don't know, that's just like it seems like it's a prepackaged sort of like, you know, sound-bitey way of talking about it. And it doesn't really, and that's probably like the main criticism of like the social justice community in general is that it's too fucking, like the vernacular is too counterintuitive and it's too prepackaged supermarket-y, you know.
I wouldn't even say,
you know, like teach men not to rape.
I think that the terminology is just something that a lot of people have a reflexive, defensive, knee-jerk reaction towards. I think that it's
because notice how it's not, you know, teach people about consent. It's not that. It's teach men not to rape.
Right. Which is a very inflammatory way to
hear me?
teach people about consent. Because that's ultimately
ultimately
the end goal with the teach them not to rape whole thing is teach consent better. But they use this very inflammatory language in order to get into the spotlight and stuff, which can be said to be both hurtful and helpful at the same time. I'm not entirely certain. I think it's helpful if you already understand the perspective and you're able to take a step back and think about it and understand what's being said. But the thing is, if you're not already in that mindset, if you're not already on board with the message of consent is not something that's adequately taught in the United States, then you see that statement of teach them not to rape as this very inflammatory thing that's not very helpful at all. I can completely see how people would be not only see that as wrong, but offensive as well. I can totally see
because the implication is that men need collegiate level courses to learn not to rape people. Like, come on.
I
mean, you can't possibly argue that
because we already have this problem of people not understanding consent all that well. I mean, who actually, aside from a very, 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 very small minority of serial rapists, who actually self-identifies as a rapist? Who actually says,
well, they don't need to.
It's an okay thing.
I'm sorry, what?
Who actually says, yeah, hi, I rape people. I think it's an okay thing to do. What, this is wrong? Nobody told me that. Like, obviously, that's not a thing that exists. Obviously, that's not.
Well, that's why, that's probably the argument as to why that's sort of a patronizing thing to do to men. That it treats us like de facto rapists unless educated out of it. You know what I mean? Nobody's like going around like, oh, I'm a rapist, fuck yeah. And it's like, it's sort of like taking the minority of cases, which, obviously, most men are not fucking rapists. Most of the rapes are committed by men. Yes.
But the issue here is that a lot of people don't know that they're rapists, should say. Well, racists and rapists both work, really. Because nobody sees themselves as the devil. Well, some people might, but they're crazy people that we send to prison because they've already done something, like, very likely. But outside of that, very few people like look at themselves and go, "I'm evil. This is awesome." Nobody does that. No substantial degree of people. So I can say that the reason why these inflammatory statements as slogans are used is so that they can get into the mainstream, because for so long it hasn't been mainstream. Because the idea of like consent being a problem and that rape being a problem that a lot of people don't really understand, this goes back years and years and years and years. I've seen documentaries from the 80s of people who are following others who are rape victims or child abuse victims who just don't really accept that to be the case, and their victimizers also not accepting it to be the case as a result of nobody involved being properly informed as to what is going on, as to what the right thing is to do, as to how to look at the situation in such a way that is beneficial to everybody. So this is something that's been going on for a long time now, and so, like, out of frustration, I can see the idea of people coming up and saying, teach men not to rape. Now, again, like I said, unless you're already in the mindset of accepting that there is this problem of people not understanding consent as well as they probably should in the United States, then you're probably not going to look at that statement very favorably, and you're going to look at that in a very reflective
well, you said it. If you're one of these people who doesn't understand, not one of these men who needs to be taught out of their like conditioning to rape people, which is the implication.
Yeah, that's why I said people.
So then that's not, and so it seems like you're on the verge of accepting that that's not a productive way of discussing consent.
No, it's not a productive way of
because that's my position.
But I honestly don't think that the people who are saying that really think that they're going to be making a massive change in society by saying that. I think that what they're doing is trying to say something inflammatory to get people to start talking about it, and I think it's actually worked. But it's at the cost of people taking that side as seriously as they probably should. Like, because they're in the spotlight now, we're all looking at that and going, okay, let's talk about this. But the problem is, because they had to do something so inflammatory to get that spotlight, we're starting off at a huge disadvantage to actually addressing the problem that they want addressed. We get to talk about.
Well, that goes back to the SJW label, and it just kind of, it goes back to why, even as someone who does give a shit about what you could describe as social justice issues, like, I don't necessarily want to align with Black Lives Matter or feminists, because I view their tactics and their rhetoric and their vernacular to be divisive and toxic. And I just don't view it as a productive way to attack these fucking issues. You know what I mean? It seems just very bitter and divisive, and again, it gives like Sean Hannity more ammunition to talk shit about it and dismiss it.
Yeah, but that again,
you know what I mean?
This goes back to what I said before: is that we're not going to be able to stop that. Well, the best we can do is try and get people to stop viewing things in such a reflexive, defensive, and destructive manner that we do on the internet, because that's sort of a main thing. Because okay, I can understand the frustration that my fellow liberals may have, for instance, or a liberal-minded people, or left-leaning people. I don't know what you guys want to refer to yourselves as. Doesn't matter that much. I can understand the frustration that is had by this phenomena on the internet, where Nazism is apparently something that we can debate over as to whether or not it's bad. This is not a case. This is something that we need to discuss, that we need to have an open-minded discussion on. Maybe Nazis aren't so bad. Like, that's an actual conversation.
You remind me of these people who describe themselves as race realists.
Yeah. These are people who
that?
actually like legitimately like to think that like racist nonsense is something that we have to have an open and honest discussion about, because maybe it's totally valid to see black people as being stupid white people. I'm very frustrated by it. So
it's like trying to come up with like scientific justifications for their racism, which is just fucking absurd.
And they always fail at it too, because like every time they try, it's never something that's peer reviewed that actually like supports whatever it is that they're saying. It's usually some book that was written by some dude who's long been discarded as relevant in the field. Like, Philip Rushton dying is not something that I'm going to shed a whole lot of tears over, to be honest, because he spawned so many people who just use so much of his research to say, see, look, they're all stupid. And we still got this other guy. I can't remember his name. He was featured in a documentary recently by George Rivera. I don't know. I think that's his name. But he did a documentary called Hate Rising, and where he pointed out that a lot of the like super bad racists, like the extreme racists, are coming out a lot more recently with the election being as it is. Like, these are people who always existed, but they usually kept it to themselves. They usually kept it at home. Maybe went on the internet and said some stuff. But now they're actually going out and like meeting and organizing and coming out and actually saying stuff now, because they feel like the society is more accepting of this because of X, Y, and Z, whatever that may be. A lot of them see Trump as being this thing, this leader who is giving rise to the discussion that maybe Mexicans are in fact a bunch of rapists. Like, this is a valid thing.
Yeah, dude, fuck Trump. Oh my God. I mean, I know I'm not not offering any sort of originality to that, but yeah, fuck Trump. I mean,
but it's not even relevant necessarily to Trump. Like, he's a factor, I'll say, but I don't think he's the only factor. I think there's a lot of things involved here. Like this, every single punchback against what people perceive as the PC left, the PC police, and blah de blah, destroying society, is more ammunition, not just for the Hannitys, not just for the O'Reillys, but also for the people who are grand wizards in like fucking Michigan, who are like, hey, they're starting to get it. They're starting to get that white people are being kind of oppressed and that we need to fight back against all these dirty Latinos and Beaners. Like, that's what they're saying. And
that's part of why I wanted to show you that Danny Duchamp character who, are you familiar? You're familiar? You did say you weren't familiar with him, but are you familiar with Edgy Sphinx?
No, I don't know.
Well, he's like a pretty much like out and out racist on YouTube, and he had this Danny Duchamp character come on his channel, and he did a White Lives Matter video, which was just the most laughable fucking shit. And I think the problem is that, I mean, aside from them being like racist, ignorant fucking morons, people focus too much on like the police shooting aspect and not like all the other factors like the stop and frisk and the for-profit prisons and
yeah, which is
racial
funny
profile,
if you actually read the
like
Bible,
racial profiling that we know for a fact happens, and all that stuff that basically keeps minorities into like a long running cycle of poverty and crime, in my opinion.
have you seen Black Lives Matter's platform? Like the actual like
I've seen
they're trying to push forward.
well, I've seen what do you call it? Campaign Zero, which I agree with.
Yeah,
pretty much 100%.
Campaign Zero is kind of interesting because that's the core like purpose of the movement of Black Lives Matter is to put forward all the
Well,
Campaign Zero. That's the core thing. Yeah, there's going to be some members who are going to be assholes. There's going to be some members who are going to be straight up like fucking fake douchebags. And then there's just going to be some that are just uninformed, some that just don't really know what they're talking about. But again, this is something that you get in every single, no matter what you're talking about. But if you go to what Campaign Zero is, there's really not a whole lot there that's there that we can be like, oh, that's too much to ask for. No, it's all totally reasonable. Well,
the problem as I see it is that I don't perceive Campaign Zero being in the forefront of the conversation. What I see is this notion of, well, you know, white people need to be aware of their toxic whiteness and their patriarchal privilege, and it's a lot of these like intuitive terms that like a lot of these like pieces of academic jargon that are not immediately fucking like I don't know, I reject a lot of them. I think a lot of them are stupid and kind of counterproductive, but it's not really perceived as like, it's not very it's not very policy substance based on the surface.
I think a lot of people here with this jargon is not that you don't accept the jargon, but you don't accept the way in which it's vastly used on the internet and in the media at large. Like the way in which most.
I also, another thing is that I've made all these criticisms that I'm presenting to you that I think we can find some degree of common ground on. I've done this on the internet, and it's resulted in all kinds of shit, up to and including I was banned from a DIY punk rock venue in my town. Like I don't know if you're like into like the DIY basement punk scene at all. Maybe maybe not. For
maybe not in your area.
A decent chunk of my life, I was involved in going to these like basement shows and seeing like underground bands, but I now am banned from this particular venue because my opinions violate the safe space policy. And basically, I just have had, you know, I guess you could say scathing critiques of far left activists, you know, including feminists or Black Lives Matter. But it's not that on the policy, I agree for the most part.
It's just the way they go about it.
So I just, you know.
It's the it's not the goals. It's
I don't really know. Sorry?
It's not the goals necessarily. It's the methods.
What did you say?
I'm saying it's not the goals necessarily for you. It's the methods.
It depends. I guess it depends on which policy or which message you're talking about. But I mean, I don't really appreciate the teach men not to rape and 1 in 3 women will be raped on college campus bullshit. And
I swear that number keeps getting bigger and bigger the more people talk about it. First it was 1 in 5, then it was 1 in 4, now it's 1 in 3. What happens? Like, we're gonna get to the point where like everybody gets raped eventually.
Yeah, and so like Lundy, like I talk about this on my Facebook, and there are literally like feminists like keeping tabs on my Facebook feed right now, like as we speak, to keep tabs on me because they think that my opinions are tantamount to Roosh V, basically, and based on my Facebook posts. And so we're talking like some radical type people here who just do not accept any sort of dissenting opinion whatsoever. And so that leads back to what you could describe as an SJW, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you may not, you know, and I could see why you wouldn't accept such a term, but
I think the best thing, if you're going to refer to, because if you're using the word SJW, you have to understand there's a lot of baggage that comes with it, with a lot of people who misuse the term, at least as far as how you use it. Because there are a lot of people who use the term for a variety of different reasons. It can be used to describe extremist leftists who might not understand proportionality and might be very inflammatory and very unhelpful, or even violent in the way in which they do things, to just not being a racist. Like these are all the that's the
Yeah.
of people who use the word. So if you understand that that's sort of like the baggage that comes with the term, maybe find something better. And my suggestion earlier when we talked about it was maybe just say extremist leftists. Maybe.
Or, well, would you accept? Would you accept regressive left? That might be, well, that, because that could be another like generic pejorative overused on the internet.
I would say no, because yeah, that's it. Again, it is another like generic pejorative that's used for a variety of different things. It can be used. I've seen that being used in such a way as to mean everything from people who apologize for Islamic extremism to people who maybe have a problem being racist towards Muslims. I've seen it used in that sort of vague sort of spectrum as well. And I've also seen it used on people on the right as well, because the term regressive left is such an oxymoronic phrase. Because what regressive left means, if you take it word for word, is right. It's right leaning. That's what it kind of means. Now, that's not what.
What does it mean? You were cutting out. I'm sorry, you were cutting out. What did you say?
If you break it down word for word, regressive left means being on the right. If you break it down,
so it kind of like cancels each other out.
Cancels itself.
Well, I mean, but that to me, that what you're saying has implications that someone on the left can't be wrong by definition. That's what that sounds like to me.
No. I'm saying that the term regressive left is a very strange phrase for a variety of reasons. The first is the fact that broken down, it's kind of nonsensical in just the individual words being put together. But
okay. It's on a semantic level. On a semantic level, you're saying
that's just a semantic thing. I'm not saying that people on the left can't be wrong. Obviously, we've gone over this a multitude of times during this chat. Obviously, because I'm totally cool with the term extremist leftist, because there are extremist leftists who are fucking assholes. And this is something that was brought up on another Facebook sort of back and forth that we had, where you asked me if it was like totally cool to like pelt Lauren Southern with jars of piss, like if that's an okay thing to do. And I said, well, obviously fucking not, because she's not pelting other people with jars of piss, is she? And then Xenostride.
Yeah, that reminds me of. That reminds me of the whole fucking Jordan Peterson thing in Canada. Are you familiar with this whole debacle?
Jordan Peterson in Canada. Is that the Nazi who got hit?
No. Jordan Peterson is the professor of psychology at University of Toronto, who is leading sort of like this protest against this new proposed legislation called Bill C-16, I believe it's called.
I have no idea.
It's meant to include transgender people in various discrimination laws, but the thing is that it's worded in a way that is really vague, and his argument is that it could potentially open up the doors to be it could open up the doors to like either fine or get somebody fired or jail someone for not using the right gender pronoun, because it is in fact, because they do have hate speech laws in Canada, and so
yeah, that's
you'd have to look it up, but
that's a jar of worms nobody wants opened. Yeah, I can see the concern there. I can see the concern.
And so Lauren Southern, back to her, like there was a video of her attending the protest. There were a bunch of LGBTQ plus protesters, disrupting Jordan Peterson and all of his supporters getting together to talk about free speech. Like they hooked up like a noise machine to the PA, and like a couple people actually like assaulted Lauren Southern and then lied about it. Like it's getting to the point where she gets assaulted at every fucking event she goes to now, which
Now,
is fucked
I'll say
up.
this.
Like, I mean, you know,
I'll say this. I don't really think that Lauren Southern is a good person, and I don't really like her all that much.
yeah, I agree.
But
I
will
agree.
say that I don't see any reason to pelt her with stuff. I don't see any reason to physically assault her or anything like that. If she's at like if you want to shout shit at her and say she's an asshole, she's a mean person, and then blah blah blah, go for it. Because I would probably agree with that. But
Yeah.
again, this gets into the notion of proportionality. What is she doing? What are they doing? And is what you're doing escalating the situation? Because if it is, you're probably not in the right there. And this is a disagreement that Zenestrad and I have, because he pointed out that while he also disagrees with like pelting Lauren Southern with jars of piss and shit, he would say, yeah, but that's because she's not a literal Nazi, and if you are a literal Nazi, then it actually is okay to do that. And this is something I disagree with. Now,
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah, I would disagree with that too.
I understand what
because that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I understand what his argument is on that, and the argument that he gives is that literal Nazism, the actual Nazism that's expressed in the West these days, is a necessarily fundamentally violent position. Like, there's no way to have that position and want any of the things that they want without also wanting violence to be had. And as such, violence towards them is then justified. Now, I disagree with this.
Preemptive aggression, though. Preemptive aggression is kind of fucked up, because then
like, if they start
the bad guy.
If they start to actually attack people in any one way, then sure, feel free to fight back and feel free to organize to fight back.
Yeah, but it's like you could have views that like someone in their subjective opinion could be like, well, you are a literal Nazi, so therefore that gives me the justification to preemptively beat the shit out of you. Like Antifa does that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know the YouTuber Kraut and T. You know that guy?
Yeah, I'm aware of him.
Well, he's I don't like him either. Like, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. But he's actually been getting like threats from the Antifas over email and shit, and they're basically like, they pretty much want to curb stomp the fuck out of him, from what I understand. But I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. That's just fucked up, I would say.
Yeah.
Tell him in detail. Tell him in detail why he's wrong. And, in my opinion, that would be obviously way better way to go about it.
I mean, it's a better way to go about it. It's a more peaceful way of going about it. It definitely entails a lot less like violence, and it also might make people a little bit more like receptive to what you're saying. But at the same time, when you really think about it, how long have we, in the general sense, on the internet, in real life, anywhere, how long have we been having the same discussions over and over and over and over and over again, just phrased in different ways? Like, it's sort of amazing to me where you look back and you look at like people who were in favor of lynching, for instance, back in like the 1920s or 30s. There have been papers, there have been actual like dissertations written about why lynching is justified. And when you look at the arguments that they give, it's so close to arguments that people give these days as to why maybe shooting a black dude as a cop is justified. They're so very close in their wording and the principles that they use and the arguments that they use. It's actually a little weird. And then you can go back, but then you can go back even further on other things that we've been arguing about lately that have like direct parallels. Back in like the 1800s, for instance, when thou was being replaced with you, and someone was saying, oh, this is such a bastardization of the English language for people to use the word you in a singular fashion. It's absolute nonsense. We can't have this, or cats and dogs will be living together. And this goes straight up to when people say, well, I'm not going to refer to somebody as they, okay, because that's just, for one, it's grammatically incorrect. Like language doesn't change over time. And like, this is such a big deal to their lives. And you can go back and you can look at arguments that have been had over centuries that are so parallel to arguments we've had today that you have to start asking yourself, how receptive are people to actually just reasoning things out? Because it doesn't seem like they're that receptive. I mean, I can admit, because I'm a person who's actually an example of this, of being a person who has been receptive to arguments over time in order to change my position. My position has changed on a variety of different topics for a variety of different reasons over time, mostly by engaging with people and actually having conversations and thinking about it later on. I've never, however, and I think this is something that can't be stressed enough, it has never been the case that I have been arguing very ardently a topic, and I've been convinced that I was wrong the moment somebody presented a point that actually disagreed with me that was valid. It usually happens when I review what was said later on in my head, later on down the line, that I start to go, maybe I was wrong. It never happens in the thick of it. Because in the thick of it, when you're actually having an active argument with somebody, when you're actually having an active discussion, when you're talking to somebody about some very emotionally charged thing that you guys talk about to a bunch of people all the time, it's very difficult for you to accept new information into your head. You might hear it, but you're not going to actually take it into account in the things that you're about to say next. Because you're in battle mode, you're in defense mode. You're not in the mode of accepting the new information. Like, this has happened to me for feminism. This has happened to me for white privilege. This has happened to me for systemic racism. These are all things I completely rejected at some point in the past, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years ago. Being extremely anti-Muslim was something that I was big into, because years ago I was a huge Sam Harris fan. New information.
Oh boy, that guy's interesting.
New information came to light when I was having these conversations over time that I ended up changing my mind about stuff. I always, it's an interesting situation, because while I can change my mind and I recognize that other people can change their minds, I also recognize that it's not because I had a conversation with somebody that changed my mind. It's because I grew up and started having a more nuanced understanding of the world myself. I had to be the person to change. Nobody else can force you to change. It's too idealistic to get to that point. Somebody in the chat basically just said we went from Negro to colored people to Black to African American, and now I have some Black friends who are telling me the Black's in now. That it's now Black.
Well, it's person of color, to use the far left's preferred nomenclature.
But I have Black friends who think that person of color is actually wrong and that I shouldn't use it.
It does sound patronizing and weird to me.
It kind of does, because it sort of groups everybody who's not white together, because that's sort of what it means when people use the term. Yeah. It's everybody who is not white, which, it sort of erases the individual different cultures that we're referring to when we say stuff like that. We are literally reducing people to their skin tone when we say person of color. And so Black people that I know say, please don't use that term. Now, I have other Black friends who are totally fine with that term, but I have to listen to them on an individual level. If this person is not okay with me using person of color, then I have no problem saying not using the term around them, or in a way in which they're going to view me saying it. If another person says that they are cool with it, then I might be more receptive to using it towards them. The question here is how much empathy can we really have at any one given time about people? Because I feel the less you're friends with people, the less you regularly interact with a community or a culture, the less empathetic you are to whatever it is that they want, to whatever it is that they're asking for, to whatever it is they're fighting for. If you're not entrenched in a culture, you're not likely to give too much of a shit as to what happens to that culture. It happens all the time with white Americans, or shouldn't say white Americans, any American, and whatever happens in the Middle East, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away. Whatever happens over there, we're so disconnected from it. The fact that most of our phones can basically be traced back to slave labor. Almost nobody even takes a thought about it or even cares about it. And even people who are aware of it will still buy it because they really don't have a whole nother option. They might be aware of it consciously, but they'll be like, you know what? I need the new Galaxy S5, you know? And they'll still get that, even if they know.
Well, that's, that brings me back to the voluntarists who think that, like, anything voluntary is capitalism. It's like, this iPhone is a product of capitalism, which is inherently voluntary. It's like, no, because these were, made by either indentured servants or slaves, who had absolutely no say in anything having to do with their labor at all. There was probably even like a decent social safety net or a union or anything to make things not shitty for them. So I guarantee, it's like, it's just in the absence of any meaningful choice. It's like technically they had the choice of one or the other, but was it a meaningful choice? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Which is sort of like why I really don't, because there are some people that I know who consider themselves anarchists to some degree, not anarchist capitalists, but anarchists in general, who, whenever I see the argument of, yeah, but you can't talk about this stuff without using Twitter or Facebook or the internet or using a phone while drinking a latte, that all of this is what capitalism gave you, so you should accept it. And I'm so annoyed by that, because I'm like, okay, because they had another option. Yeah, there's another option over here that doesn't require them to take part in the system that they're against, that they can just use.
And also, but these are the same kind of people who would decry, like we were talking about earlier, corporatism. Like, it's not true capitalism unless the government is completely out of the picture. But it's like, you're criticizing. You're criticizing corporatism, but that iPhone that you have was the result of a government grant in the first place, which you would describe as corporatism. So therefore, by your own logic, you can't criticize corporatism because you use products that came about due to what you would describe as corporatism.
Yeah.
So it's like
they'll take credit for anything to argue against people who are anti-capitalist as being capitalist, but then they'll decry it as not being true capitalism, depending on who they're talking to and what context they're talking. That at one point, Twitter can be both a capitalist and a corporatist thing, depending on who they're talking to. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's an internal. I consider myself somewhat on the left, and I definitely see how the ANCAP philosophy is internally inconsistent. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And it's not, it's probably just the result of, like, vote.co or 4chan type message board shit posting more so than anything. Scholarly.
There is like a source of like scholarly philosophical thought on anarcho-capitalism, but it's such a minority position that like almost nobody really takes it seriously when it comes to scholastic.
Well, it probably comes from Ayn Rand, basically, but then also, like, nowadays they all love Stefan Molyneux, who's a fucking cult leader.
Stefan Molyneux.
Yeah, that guy is fucking insane.
He is such a big thought leader. He is so, he understands everything. A lot of modern capitalism, I would say, stems from Ayn Rand and sort of a closed objectivism. If it's okay for me to refer to it as that, closed objectivism being mainly the Ayn Rand philosophy that any information that doesn't come directly from her objectivist philosophy, that doesn't conform with that, is necessarily wrong and therefore should be discarded. Which is something that you find a lot in sort of and capitalist circles, that any sort of like demonstration that perhaps some assumptions that are made for their economic theory might not be all that valid needs to be immediately discarded. Like, who's the guy? I can't remember his name, but I had an argument with a guy about the wage gap, I think like a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, where I explained to him like, okay, so yeah, we can say the 77% number is not due entirely to discrimination. We can say that, but there is some discrimination involved. And he used the usual argument of, well, you know, if they can get away with it, they would only hire women, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, that's not true. And here's a paper demonstrating that the gap hasn't been closed. Here are 2 more papers demonstrating discrimination in hiring practices and starting pay. And he said, none of that's true or accurate. And I'm like, okay, how? And he goes, because it goes against basic economics. I went, what? He goes, it's not true because it goes against economics. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, it goes against economics, therefore it can't be true. I'm like, that's not how shit works. That's not how reality works.
It goes against our Lord and Savior, the free market.
That's basically what it was. Oh, Shane Killian. That was his name, Shane. He says that shit all the time. He's very big on the free market, on laissez-faire free market economy and capitalism. And like anything that goes against the efficacy of that is just not true. Like it's not that you have no evidence for it. You can give evidence, but he'll just reject it as being wrong because it doesn't fit what he thinks is supposed to be the case. And he'll call people liars if they try to demonstrate otherwise. You're either a liar or you're a coward when it comes to Shane. And this is something that's been going on for years when it comes to him. He's not really all that relevant on the YouTube scene anymore, but oh my God, he was a treat.
I was gonna ask if he was like a prominent YouTuber or something I can look up.
He's a guy, you can find him on YouTube still, I'm pretty sure. I don't think he closed his channel or anything. You can still see him commenting every now and then on stuff, but he hasn't really done a whole lot lately.
I wanted to bring up something else that I've been seeing going on in the media very recently regarding the male birth control methods and how, at least in my anecdotal personal experience, actually pretty much only on Facebook, but then also on The Daily Show, I've seen feminists effectively saying, you know, nut up, you pussies. This is what we've had to go through. And it's kind of like, aren't you the ones decrying this concept of toxic masculinity and stoicism and patriarchy, basically, and then basically turning around and being like, again, nut up, you pussy.
Okay,
and it's just like, you know what I'm talking about?
So I don't know if you've seen Louis C.K.'s segment on, I can't remember which late night talk show it was, but he was basically endorsing Hillary Clinton.
Fuck that.
And he basically was like, well, when I endorse her, it's because she's a mother. Mothers are just superior to fathers, just fundamentally. Yeah, he was making jokes and stuff and whatever. But there was a feminist article that was written explaining why that's totally wrong and very bad to say. It's an example of what's of basically benevolent sexism, which is a concept that doesn't really get gone over that much because a lot of people, it's very counterintuitive as a concept, like sexism that's benevolent. But basically, it's sort of like when you say like black people have big dicks. Like that might be a nice thing. That might be a nice thing they might like to have put about them, but it also increases this idea that black people are fundamentally different from white people in a variety of ways that sort of justifies the more negative aspects of stereotyping. It's the same thing when you say that like women are morally superior or women are just tougher or better than men in X, Y, and Z because of, I don't know, because they can give birth to a child or something. Or that they're better, or that they're just better nurturers. They're better nurturers. They're better mothers. Well, these are things that sort of hurt both women and men in a variety of ways. Like this overarching idea that women are just naturally better caregivers and naturally better mothers, and it's just always going to be the way it is one of the foundational reasons why dudes might have their kids taken away from them in the concept of a divorce, where the woman wants full custody rights. They might not really have a whole lot to stand on because perhaps the judge who's presiding over the case might believe these little things where he goes, well, I mean, I'm an old-fashioned guy, and I believe that kids always have to be with their moms, so you're just going to have to deal with not having custody. That might actually happen, and it has happened. Like, everyone knows, like, at least one guy, or is a guy, who has been fucked over by divorce court to one degree or another. Now, this when you get into it, it actually gets even more complicated because there's this notion that a lot of guys actually don't even fight for custody, which can be for a variety of reasons. It might be because they just don't believe they're going to get it, and they might be right about that, or they just don't, or they're too jaded by the system to believe that they're going to actually be able to get anything out of it.
That reminds me of that reminds me of that movie. That reminds me of that movie with Dustin Hoffman, Kramer versus Kramer, for some reason. You ever seen that shit?
I haven't seen that movie.
Oh, it's great, man. It's a if you watch that and you don't at least get a little misty-eyed, you're made of stone, man. But I don't know. But like, I'm just like pissed. Well, pissed. Yeah, I'm perturbed that I saw a lot of feminists on my timeline putting dudes' noses in the male contraceptive thing. Like, it was halted because there were a lot of severe side effects. But I mean, their argument was like, well, we have to deal with that anyway, so fucking nut up, you pussy. But it's like, again, that's just not a really productive way of talking about it. And so I piped up and I said, like, wouldn't you guys be the same ones to decry stoicism and toxic masculinity and shit like that? And then they just responded with just this really dismissive, condescending sort of like, any of my male allies want to chime in and set this fucking guy straight. And then they were like, you're getting put on the don't fuck list, you MRA fucking MGTOW neckbeard fucking fedora wearing loser. And it's just the typical fucking derision and just emotionally manipulative dismissal tactics that I always see from feminists and what I would consider SJWs, which
this sort of brings me to an interesting point, is that, do you remember in my long rambly video, long sort of nonsensical video, where I brought up that a lot of people tend to be in the quote unquote correct positions more by accident than by actually reasoning towards it?
Sure. I could see that. I don't remember that part of the video, but I could definitely see where that would be. Sure.
I think that the difference in experience, in the personal experience by feminists, is a big reason why some people who would quite otherwise be allies are so ardently not. I think that the fact that I really haven't experienced a whole lot of like very toxic feminism that has sort of like been particularly against me in one way or another is perhaps the reason why I'm a lot more likely to be more receptive to messages that are given, and why I'm also probably a lot more likely to sort of brush off any negative things that might come from like feminists in general, or people just who are social justice advocates. And I think that because, and this is just my hypothesis, I can't back this up really. I think that because you have been in combat with these people for so much, like either your pop feminists, your mainstream feminists, or your social justice advocates, by sort of playing devil's advocate to one degree or another, or saying, okay, there are issues that men have. The fact that you're dealing with the ones that are more likely to attack you and come after you is a big reason why, like, you might be disincentivized towards being a sort of like feminist ally or whatever. Like,
yeah, and they're not, you know, like for instance, like, oh, we're getting a lot of feedback here. So that reminds me of how feminists don't really step up to the plate on circumcision, like, at all. And I know that they have expressed like, yeah, well, technically this is wrong, but they don't really fucking prioritize it. And it just, so every time I see a feminist whinging on about a fucking magazine cover or something that they, in their subjective opinion, looks sexist to me, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, why aren't you, like, where are your priorities at? That's my knee-jerk sort of reaction.
I would say, okay, so my sort of position on that is I agree that feminists don't really prioritize male issues. And they can be said for a variety of reasons why they don't. I'm a dude, and as a dude, I'm going to care more about what happens to dudes. That's just how I am, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. It doesn't mean that I don't care about what happens to women. That doesn't mean I don't care about what happens to non-binary people. It just means,
and that's why I reject this notion that like why is MRA such a pejorative? And by the way, I understand like certain people within that movement are fucking really weird. Like,
I guess
the way they can
well, the reason why MRA
What's that?
is pejorative is because you have people who are considered like the top members of the MRA movement who say shit like, oh, if a woman gets beat the shit out of, it's her fault that she chose a partner that would beat the shit out of her. Or women are too unreasonable to vote. Aaron Pitsey.
Who said that?
Aaron Pitsey.
I'm not familiar with that person. I pretty much only exposed myself to like I've exposed myself to like Karen.
She's like one of the only MRAs that has actually done actual activist work, like trying to open up shelters for men and stuff, where she has actually said, and she said it at I think the last International Men's Conference that they had. She was there, and she basically said, if a woman comes along and she says that she's been beaten and she's been attacked and she's been in some way abused by a man, and she says it's not my fault, it's his fault. No, it's your fault. You chose him. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's obviously fucking repulsive. That's obviously repulsive. But I mean, you want to go tit for tat on that? I mean, let's go through the fucking quote book of fucked up things feminists said. When Andrea Dworkin fucking said, you know, I'd like to see a man beat into a pole with a fucking apple.
Like, I'll go ahead and say this: if you think that Andrea Dworkin is in any way representative of mainstream feminism, that is clearly silly. That's about as silly as saying that the Scum Manifesto is taken super serious in feminist circles. It's not even close.
No.
Like, even in Andrea Dworkin's time, she was so highly criticized by other feminists as being out of her fucking mind on a lot of the stuff that she said. I mean, like, very few feminists took her seriously, even when she was like in her heyday, I would say.
I mean, that's all fine and dandy, but
when
that's all fine and dandy,
but when you compare it, though, to the men's rights movement, like, I'm not going to say that being an MRA makes you a bad person, but when you ask the question, why is MRA considered such a bad term and feminist isn't, it's because feminists...
feminist is too. Feminist is
well,
too.
I mean, depending on who you talk to, sure. Like, somebody can not even identify as a feminist, but if they say something that's even vaguely feminist, then they'll be called one and be called like a feminist cuck boy or something.
Yeah,
I can see that, but like the reason why MRA is a term that is seen with such derision, even by people who prioritize men's rights, like I forget the guy's name. But he was a guy who used to make videos on YouTube. He's since sort of like stopped doing that, but he's an actual activist for men's rights who works alongside feminist groups on his college campus. And he basically says, I refuse to refer to myself as a men's rights activist because I just don't see actual prioritization of men's rights as being a thing that is in mainstream men's rights activism.
Well, think about that, though. Think about that. Oh man, what's with that feedback? Okay.
No, I think I know where you're going to go with this. Like, what would be the difference between that guy and somebody?
But the thing is he's advocating for men's rights, but he won't call himself a men's rights advocate. Think about that. I mean, that doesn't make sense. You are a men's rights advocate.
I see where he's going with that, because the thing is that the entirety of the leadership of men's rights activism from its very inception has been nothing but anti-feminism. It hasn't actually been.
Well, I think maybe that's because they view feminists as sort of an obstacle to talking about that, because, like, I mean, I know it's a pretty cliche example, but the whole Chanty Binks thing where they pulled the fire alarm and prevented the male suicide talk from happening. And I mean, you know, by the way, like, try having a talk on your fucking university about male suicide and circumcision and see how quickly it gets fucking a bomb threat gets called by a feminist. I mean, well, that's so maybe from that.
That's actually interesting, because I actually fuck, I wish I could remember his name. It starts with an A, and his last name starts with an M, but I cannot remember his name. But he basically has had, like, he stood up in front of, like, the feminist groups on his campus and said, here are men's issues. And the feminist groups went, okay, yeah, that's totally valid. Like that is something that happens, is that if depending on how you present yourself and depending on the context in which you present yourself, people are a lot more receptive to what you have to say, because there are valid men's issues. Like, and you'd have to be completely closed-minded not to see that there are. But that doesn't mean that everybody who claims, quote, scare quotes around claim, to care about these issues actually do. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at people who are self-identified MRAs, across the board, it is not about helping men. It is about stopping feminism. That's what it's about. If you go to the International Men's Conference, if you go to,
I would just go back to the point. I would go back to the point of like, well, there's just been too many instances of feminists blocking conversations about men's issues, and so it would seem, from there, it's like, well, of course they're going to be adversaries, because I mean, like, I don't see, while I do see a lot of MRAs talking shit about feminists on the internet, and it's often in a really fucking weird, like, non-constructive way, I don't see MRAs pulling the fire alarms on feminist talks and shit like that.
But
I don't see them.
Feminists do that like once.
It's been a handful of times, and it's like it's pretty much driven the MRAs into like the dark recesses of the internet, where they're probably going to stay. But by the way, like, what do you think about Karen Strawn, for instance? Do you think she's like too weird? And
yeah, I mean, this is a woman who has made who the last time I even gave her any sort of attention, this was a couple years ago, but she basically made an article saying,
"Oh, you're cutting out so bad. You're cutting out so bad, man."
Okay, sorry. Are you starting to be able to hear me correctly now?
A little bit better.
Okay. So the last time I really gave her any sort of actual substantive amount of attention was a couple years ago. And around that time, she made an article where she said that we should be sympathetic towards dudes who beat their wives.
Really? So that was the flat out thesis of the article?
Yes.
Holy fuck.
He basically said,
well, I think
I don't understand, because if they don't beat their wives, eventually they're going to murder them. So which is better, beating them or murdering them? And I'm like, that's really not the point. Like, I don't see how you can see this as being like irrelevant. Who is saying, like, let's not beat our wives so that later on you can murder them? We're saying if you're being beaten by your significant other, leave. That's what you should be doing, not like, let's take a punch every now and then to prevent the murder later on. No, that is an insane, that I'm not even kind of gonna even address that position. That is just silliness in general. I can't. If you could shoot me that article at some point, I would, because she does a lot of, she speaks in a manner that, I mean, not dissimilar to like Molyneux, which I find to be kind of like brainwashy in a way. So I kind of, I don't know. And the honey badgers in general just seem really fucking weird to me. But I guess I just for a time was interested in them because they were talking about things that I previously was unable to talk about among feminist people. So Karen also was another attendee at the International Men's Conference of 2016.
Who you cut out?
Karen Strawn.
Karen Strawn. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, she was another attendee at the International Men's Conference of 2016. And when you look at the conference, very little of the conference had any sort of dedication towards addressing problems of men. Very little of it. I would say 90% of it had to do with those evil feminazis destroying our society. And almost all of it across the board was very strangely conservative, very right-wing stuff that had to do with traditionalism. Like, there was a speaker who talked about how the family has been destroyed by feminists because women are searching for jobs instead of good husbands. There's Paul Elam, who just kept talking about the gynocracy and how like women are in charge of everything and men are entirely powerless in the United States and it's feminism to blame. Like, these are people who don't really actually address the issues and are more interested in keeping people angry so that they can continue to keep talking about whatever they want to talk about. Like,
yeah,
I don't know if you've seen the Woolly Bumblebee.
Yeah, I can definitely see.
Huh? Sorry?
You still there and shit? You're cutting out a hell of a lot.
Not
You're cutting out a hell of a lot.
Now you're cutting out for me. I'm not. Ugh.
But you were talking about Woolly Bumblebee, I think.
Oh, yeah,
last.
yeah. I don't know if you've seen the Woolly Bumblebee on Kevin Logan's channel, but they had.
Yeah, Kevin Logan. I don't know how anyone could align themselves with Kevin Logan. That guy, like, if you want to talk about people who discuss things in a fucked up way, Kevin Logan takes the cake, man.
Well, irrelevant to that, the Woolly Bumblebee is a person who used to write for Voice for Men for a short amount of time, and she used to work very closely with people like Karen Strong and Paul Elam and these people.
Okay.
And from her personal account, having worked with Karen and having worked with Paul, her personal account was that these are people who haven't actually done anything to help men, and everything that they have done is to help themselves. Like Karen and the Honey Badgers, for instance, basically ran like a GoFundMe or something along those lines to buy them all a house.
Either what?
To buy them all a house, so that they could work
in order to buy a house.
Yeah, so that they could all work together.
The Badger Cave. The Badger Cave.
Yeah, that way they could all be
my God.
in space and work together. And like, I don't know how that helps anybody other than them. Like, what sort of actual activist work is that? Like, what? I don't see it at all. Like, and then she went on to say that she's a person who regularly supports people who actually do try to do stuff for men. Like, there was apparently a lawyer in Canada who was trying to do something. I can't remember exactly what the details were, but basically he needed like $500, I think, so that he could do an affidavit for a court so that he could address an issue in the legal system. And so he asked for $500 so that he could do this. And he got $50, and the only person who actually donated was Woolly Bumblebee, and nobody else did. And basically, this is a guy who had been fighting for men's rights for like 20 years, and he had no support whatsoever. Like, the idea that Karen and Paul and all these people couldn't just, like, I don't know, talk about that dude for like 5 minutes and put a link down and be like, here, go donate to this, and that he wouldn't get funded. Like, he totally would be. But I don't believe that Karen or the Honey Badgers or Paul or Voice for Men or any of these leaders of the MRA community actually give any sort of shit about helping men. Because every time I've seen them raise money for anything, it's usually for themselves. They're the ones who are
No, I definitely agree with you there, and it just sucks, man. Like, because like you said before, like, feminists just don't prioritize men's issues, and the MRAs are pretty fucking mental and are not taken seriously for justifiable reasons.
My issue is
it's like
they don't prioritize men's issues.
So it's like, and so it's like, well, what do guys really have then? Because feminists aren't prioritizing it. Men's rights people are psychotic. Where are we at here?
Well, I'll say this: as a dude who is, oh goodness, sorry, dinner's coming back up. As a guy who is considered to be a feminist ally or a feminist, depending on how people refer to that, which is a huge debate that I don't even want to kind of even get into right now. As a person who's involved, let's say, with the feminist community online and in my area, I will say that whenever I bring up what I feel to be a valid issue, like men's circumcision, or like the assumption of women being natural good caregivers and how that affects the court system and divorce courts and the like, whenever I bring this stuff up, my fellow feminists are actually fairly receptive towards it. Sorry, am I cutting out again?
Yeah, you're like really fragmented sounding.
Well, just
But I think I got the gist of what you said. Like you yourself do prioritize circumcision as an issue, but do you ever get derided as a neckbeard, MRA, fedora wearing loser in his parents' basement?
No, I don't.
Because I do all the time.
And that's
You know,
it's interesting to me that you've had such a diametrically opposed experience to feminists than me. And I think that it has to do with how feminists first look at you. Like, I don't know how this happened, but I was informed that apparently somewhere out there, my channel is listed, or rather my screen name is listed on some sort of list of apparently safe spaces.
wait, what is listed as a safe space?
Apparently my channel. I don't know how this happened. I didn't ask to be on it. I don't understand it whatsoever. But apparently I'm considered a safe person to talk to in some circles. I don't know who these people are. I don't know why I'm on said list, but apparently I am.
That's pretty.
And but for some reason, even though I will say male circumcision, definitely an issue. That needs to be stopped. We need to make it illegal to do that to kids. The patriarchal assumptions of the male and female sex roles, and that these things are detrimental to both men and women, and that this is how this can hurt men to the benefit of women, but is also a bad thing for women, even though it benefits them. These are things that are actually received in a somewhat positive way by other feminists. Like Christiosity, I don't know if you know who she is, but she's a person who... Yeah. But she directly works with people in need, people who are victims of a variety of different problems in their lives. And she has no problem addressing men's issues whatsoever. And she's basically considered a big man-hating feminist here on YouTube. So she would have no problem. Like, if you wanted to start like some sort of like channel that's devoted entirely towards addressing male issues, she probably wouldn't have an issue with it. She'd probably help you. Like, if you wanted to work with her on it, she'd probably be totally cool with that. In fact, recently, she did help another person who, for a while, has been fairly anti-feminist here on YouTube. But when she took part in the Reasonable Questions for Anti-SJWs video, when she took part in that, one of her questions was, what have you guys done to help men and to help the people that you feel are actually oppressed in society? And she wasn't trying to be like gotcha with her question or anything, because she actually does stuff to help men and the like. And so another guy saw this, and he'd been fairly anti-feminist. He said, okay, I'll start a channel devoted towards covering men's issues. Would you mind helping me with it? And she said, yeah. And now they have a joint channel. I'd have to find the link to it, but she posted it on her Facebook and everything. And so they're working together towards raising awareness of men's issues. And she's a feminist. She's considered just as much of a man-hating SJW as the rest of us are. So, I mean, you can find some bad feminists. You can find some bad ones that have no interest in addressing issues outside of whatever they consider to be important. And to an extent, I can kind of understand it, because if I'm a person who's going to say that because I'm a man, men's issues are going to take priority to me, then I can't say that a female feminist should take my men's issues as a priority over hers. It goes both ways. That's how I see it. I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, I just go issue by issue, and if I see some injustice there, I will speak out against it. That's where I'm at.
I agree with you that if you see injustice, you should speak out against it. But concerning the idea of, as guys, we can both understand the idea of male circumcision and how that needs to not be as culturally pervasive as it is when it comes to just doing an entirely unnecessary procedure that hurts babies. We can both understand that that's a problem. and we both
yeah, and then it's like, and then boys are told later on that, and then basically later on, boys are told, or when they grow into men, they're basically brainwashed into this notion that they had been done a favor because it's for ease of cleaning and it's for cosmetic reasons. The implication being that your unaltered penis would be dirty and ugly.
Yeah.
Basically.
Which is funny because if you ask women, all penises are kind of weird looking, regardless of if they're circumcised or uncircumcised. Which,
yeah, but it's just,
I agree.
It's just kind of fucked up. I mean, and then, like male privilege gets thrown around and it's like, well, dude, my dick is mutilated. What the fuck is wrong with you?
I think that what we need to understand is that just because we have issues, valid issues, doesn't mean we don't have privilege. But I think what other people need to understand is that privilege isn't as ridiculous as it is. Like this stereotype that every white dude out there can just go out and buy a Porsche and just drive around in it whenever they want is a very hurtful stereotype to us, because especially the poor working class. Like the poor working class white people are the least talked about group of people in all of like social justice and politics in general. No one really gives that much of a fuck about us because we're already seen as having everything that we need. There's no direct oppression towards us as
you're cutting out so bad for me, man.
What's up?
Yo, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're really choppy and really fucking turbulent here. I really want to hear what you're saying here, but
God damn it! It's probably because I have my fucking fan on now. It's getting kind of warm.
I'm like 5 feet away from my microphone, like maybe even 6. So maybe that's why I'm coming in so clear. Are you like directly straight up?
My mic is a piece of shit that's connected directly to my webcam, so I don't really know what to say about that.
Interesting. Are people in the chat complaining about the audio? I need to get
a better mic, honestly. I really do. I need to invest in something better here.
Yeah, but fucking, I don't know what I was gonna say.
Like what I was saying is that the poor working class white dude.
What's that?
The poor working class white dude is the least talked about, like, oppressed group in all of social advocacy and politics. The only people who ever talk to us are people who say that they're going to make it better, who are the people who are the least likely to make it better, which are the Republicans who want to cut taxes for the rich. That's the least likely group to actually help us, and they're the only people who actually talk to us. And people are wondering why the poor working class white dude is going to vote for the Republican, because they're the only people who pretend to even give a shit about us. That's why.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. Fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say. I'm kind of losing the plot here. I'm finding it very difficult to understand you right now. You're cutting out a lot.
Well, we have been going on for about 2 hours.
Damn.
And I do kind of want to limit these to about 2 hours, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I definitely did enjoy talking to you, though.
As you can see, I'm not a raving, foaming at the mouth dude who has no ability to actually take in any information from anybody. So yeah, that's.
You're not a what?
A raving, foaming at the mouth, rabid feminist attack dog. I'm not that. I think we've established that.
You just like, have you hung out in the punk scene at all, like the DIY punk scene?
I don't know about punk specifically, but I have done a whole lot with underground rock groups and ska groups too.
I cannot hear you, man. You're cutting out so bad.
God damn it! I need to get a better mic.
Can you repeat yourself?
Buy me a better mic, please. I'm poor. I need a better mic. Ah, damn it. But yeah, I have hung out, not necessarily with punk in particular, but with underground rock groups, and ska, strangely enough, to demonstrate how white I am. I do enjoy ska music.
Particularly radical type. Like if you hang out in the DIY basement punk scene, it's just very radical. It's very just like safe spacey, which to me is counterintuitive to what I originally thought punk was. But I was around this kind of stuff for like, I don't know, the better part of the past 15 years. And so you can't call me someone who's not, who hasn't been exposed to these arguments. And
No, I don't.
I had people argue all manner of insane shit, like
I don't.
the man depicted on the front of the beef eater box.
I think the thing here is, I'm not saying that you haven't been properly exposed or exposed enough. I think that you've been exposed to a very particular form of like social activists, I suppose, and that this has been a very negative experience towards you. And that your experience is not with people like me. Your experience is with people like Chanty Binks. If that sounds accurate.
By like beating up men because it's like preemptively fighting back against the oppressive patriarchy, and you know, if a woman beats up on a man, that's like justified because he was probably going to hit her anyway, and all kinds of shit. And
your experience is with people who are extreme, and extreme doesn't mean minority. I think that's something that can't be stressed enough either. Just because people are extreme doesn't mean that there's very few of them. There can be many people who are extreme. And I think that's something that not a lot of people take into account. The problem here is that your experience with social activists and activism has less been with people like me who might be a little bit more receptive towards looking at more points of view, and more towards, and your experience has been more with people who are more like Chanty Binks, who will tell you to shut the fuck up and let off because
Sarna Joshi, or I forget her name. Yeah, we were talking about her earlier. Sarna Joshi,
the humongous,
humongous, or like Melissa Click, or fucking Trigglypuff.
Yeah.
People like that.
Those are the people that you have experienced. Those are not the people that I have experienced.
Yeah. And not even just on message boards. Like I'm talking, like I've been friends with these people, and these are the people like currently profiling my Facebook page to keep tabs on me because they think my opinions are violent. Because
here's an interesting inverse though. My experience from my local area, like IRL, in most people that I experience, super conservative, redneck, racist assholes.
Oh, I have that experience too, man. I grew up in Waukesha, Wisconsin, which is Waukesha is the most conservative city per capita in the country. I have that same exact experience, man.
Well,
for sure.
As far as rural areas go, this is just so par for the course. And the thing is I either encounter these super racist people who have advocated actively just going out and shooting Colin Kaepernick.
Oh, fuck that.
And then you have, and on the other side, I don't have your unreasonable Chanty Binks / Trigglypuff types. I don't. And this isn't to say that like Chanty Binks is 100% unreasonable, or that Trigglypuff is some sort of 100% unreasonable person either. I don't know these people. I don't know them in general. I'm just using them as sort of like, I don't know, buzz people, I guess. But regardless, my experience with people who are actually like socially aware or more progressive is that they're more reasonable in my experience as far as real life is concerned. Whereas the people who are not very progressive, the people who are conservative, the people who are like your average Trump supporter in my area are proudly racist assholes who will talk about shooting black people.
Lame.
But they won't use the word black people. They will very proudly use the N-word.
So, wow.
That's my normal experience in everyday life. So, like, it's very, so on the other side, whenever I see somebody who seems not as progressive, say, as I am, or at least I interpret them as not being very progressive, it's very easy for me to impose that personal experience of the guy who's like, if I was at that game, I would have shot Colin Kaepernick right between his eyes. It's very easy for me to take that guy and impose him onto anybody that I disagree with on the internet, because I don't know their faces. I don't talk to them. That's why I'm doing these chat things.
Yeah.
Because I feel like having an actual one-on-one conversation, an informal one, is a lot more productive than anything people can do on a YouTube comment section or a Facebook message thread or something along these lines. It's a lot more productive because we're talking to each other and we're forced to actually listen to what the other person is saying, as opposed to setting up a formal debate where one of us has so much time and the other person has so much time and you have to respond, and we're performing for an audience and doing a pro wrestling promo. I'm not interested in doing that because it's so unhelpful towards producing any sort of productive conversation about anything.
Yeah.
We've covered a wide range of topics, whereas if we were to have even tried to have this same conversation on Facebook, it probably would have ended up with a lot more like trolling each other than it would have otherwise.
Yeah.
So
another type of feminist I wanted to say another type of feminist that I encountered was we'll go with they. I'll go gender neutral. They were complaining that this particular venue was problematic or oppressive because they have a like a nuts in your mouth, shells on the floor night. You know what I'm talking about? Where they have like free peanuts. You eat the peanuts, you throw the shells on the floor. Because she had nut allergies, right? And so it was oppressive to her because they have this fucking thing, on Sundays that she can't go to. So it's not inclusive enough. So, and this is when I hear intersectional, my knee-jerk reaction is to think of someone like that, who is like so fucking insane that they will just regard any sort of slight as a form of oppression. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe, well, here's the fun thing for me, because when I think of the word intersectional, I think of it in the way in which I understand it, which is that everybody experiences some sort of problems due to circumstances that are beyond their control, like everybody. And to me, intersectionality is the most inclusive form of social awareness and social advocacy, that it is very odd to me to watch people to specify that intersectionality is the worst form, because it's the form that allows us to look at white people, at white working class dudes, as being people who actually can experience oppression. It's the only form that allows for that. And so when people say that intersectionality is the worst form, when it's the only form that actually has some sort of basis to allow for your experience to be a justified thing to talk about, that's the weird thing to me. I don't get that. I don't understand how the only form of feminism that adequately addresses everyone's issues and is okay with addressing everyone's issues as opposed to just one demographic is supposed to be the worst of the worst. That's what I don't get.
Because it's probably just because so many of the people who take on that label are just fucking triggly puffs,
I mean, maybe, but I take on the label, and I like to think of myself as a fairly reasonable person.
Yeah, I mean, so far in this talk, you have been fucking goddamn it. I was just gonna fucking say something, but I can't think of it right now. God damn it. Yeah. Fucking. Oh, also my YouTube avatar is a picture of a disparaging poster that these punk scene people made of me a couple of years ago. You can't quite see it, but it says Duerst is the worst.
That's funny. You know what's funny about that? You know what's really great about that? I used to have an avatar that was like a drawn picture of me back when I still had headphones and smoked cigarettes. I had big old headphones, I had cigarettes, and it had me as like this big old chunky face. It was a caricature that was drawn of me by an antinatalist. Because
Anti-what?
an antinatalist.
I've never heard of that, honestly.
Basically, people who think it's morally wrong to have kids.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I engaged.
Well,
I engaged with these people
if you're not
years ago, and there was a guy who made like a montage video of all the people who have engaged with antinatalists, and he drew caricatures of them and basically added little like bubbles next to their faces that like mocked them and made fun of them. I cannot for the life of me remember what the hell mine said, but I looked at that caricature and I said, that is amazing. Can I have that? And I just took it and ran with it.
Oh, dude, I am actually in the it's in the works right now. I'm trying to make T-shirts out of this fucking Duerst the Worst thing, because it's just fuck it. Like I'll just sell T-shirts as an additional component to my channel here. I mean, like if they hate me so much, I will just I'll throw it back in their faces, and I will go to their fucking shows and sell the goddamn T-shirts myself. But I would be lying if I said that it didn't bug me on some level, because
yeah,
basically,
well, because these are people I associate with. These are people who are your friends. These are people who you identified with on some level, right?
Well, sort of, but it basically, long story short, a lot of these people, in my opinion, were using or intersectional feminism as sort of a shield to prevent any sort of criticism as to how shitty they were. I mean, we're talking like, the punk scene, it's like older dudes hanging out in basements with like younger women, like teenage girls in some cases, getting drunk and doing drugs and kind of rapey, but at the same time, it's like, oh, well, you need to be aware. Like these people virtue signaling and saying like, you need to be aware of your privilege, Dan, and you need to you need to stand with us against rape culture. And it's like, motherfucker, like you spent the better part of your 20s getting drunk with fucking high schoolers, man. And so it's like, I would basically vociferously talk shit about that hypocrisy.
You know what's funny?
I would get drunk. I would get drunk as fuck and like talk shit about it. And
one of the most hated among anti-feminists anyway websites that promotes feminism is called Everyday Feminism, and they talk about that kind of shit all the time. They always talk about hypocritical feminists. Like, I don't know of any feminist website that criticizes other feminists more than Everyday Feminism.
Did Everyday Feminism post an article saying like, oh, these men don't want to take the birth control, they're pussies? Did they post anything like that?
I don't think so. Not that I remember.
Because if they did, then
they're usually a lot more like reasonable, as far as I know. I think there was one article that I thought that I didn't really agree with that happened a while ago. I can't remember exactly what it was about, but it was basically like there was a trans woman who did a photo shoot, and it was supposed to be seen, or at least it was sold as this very empowering sort of thing. Like she's an actress. She's in Orange is the New Black. What the hell is her name? I can't remember because I don't watch that show. I don't keep up to date. But she had a photo shoot where she was tastefully naked. I mean, they didn't show anything. And it was seen as empowering and the like. And then I think somebody on Everyday Feminism basically wrote an article saying that it was totally not empowering because she's a very sexy trans woman. And
what?
I'm like, and I'm sitting here like, okay, so basically what you're saying is if you're pretty and trans, it doesn't really count as empowering for you to embrace who you are. But there was some more shit that was said in that article, and it got so much shit from the feminist community because there was stuff that she said like that some trans women are not comfortable with who they are enough, and so they have to pump themselves full of drugs and do endless surgeries and blah blah blah. And there were so many feminists who were actually going against this and being like, okay, so basically what you're saying is you're against female choice if that choice is to look a particular way that they want to look, only if that way in which they want to look is pretty. So there's a lot of backlash for that one, but I think that's the only article that I read of theirs that was like an issue, and that was like a year and a half ago, I think.
Oh, weird, man. That reminds me of back to my main exposure to feminism, was just the punk scene. There was this guy I knew who he was at a show or some DIY venue, and he basically expressed the opinion like, yeah, I'm attracted to trans people. I've had 3 trans girlfriends. And they basically like attempted to ostracize him because they were accusing him of fetishizing trans people. But you know, it's just like, well, if he had said like, I don't want to date trans people, they would have accused him of, you know, being transphobic. So it's like, you can't fucking please these people. You know what I'm saying? Or should people just not have an opinion on anything and just shut the fuck up? Maybe that's the reasonable fucking course of action. I don't know.
Oh shit, we have been going on for about 2.5 hours. Do you want to call it?
Oh really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, why not, man? But yeah, it was nice talking to you, dude.
Yeah, we can do this again. We can do this again. I have somebody scheduled for next week, but yeah, any other time you want to do this, we can do this whenever. I want to make sure that I do this as like a fairly regular weekly thing. I think people will start to appreciate it.
What are you doing next week?
What's up?
What are you doing next week? Who are you going to be talking with next week?
He's a guy, Impious VIR. He's actually not very, to my understanding, he's not very active in sort of like the social justice aspect. He's more into the atheist and religion debate thing. But he's a guy I met like years and years ago, actually, and he and I both had debates with a dude named Creation Liberty, which was a very interesting guy because Creation Liberty, he was actually featured on Potholer 54's channel once. As a potential Golden Crocoduck winner. But anyway, he's gotten back in touch with me, and he'd like to have a chat with me and do a hangout with me and the like. He actually had one on the True Pukas channel, Philip Rose, Liberal Ogre, that guy. He had a hangout apparently on that channel, and he's had some hangouts he's done on, I think, his own channel where he's debated or just had conversations with like liberal Christian professors and the like. So I'm not entirely certain what that conversation is going to cover, but I figure it's going to be interesting enough, and he wants to talk to me, so fuck it.
Nice, man. Well, I'll probably actually like give your name to a couple people. Maybe you'd like to have a conversation with them. People who
I'm open to everybody. Everybody who wants to talk to me, I'm open to having a chat with. It doesn't matter if your channel has like 10 subscribers or if you don't even have a channel. It might be a little difficult for me to talk to you if you don't have any sort of actual internet presence, but well, I'll see what I can do. It doesn't matter to me what positions you have on whatever. It doesn't matter to me who you are, how big you are, how small you are. If you want to chat, that's what this place is for. Let's have a fucking talk. That's what I want to do.
Right on, man. Cool. Well, call it then.
All right. This has been Let's Chat with my first guest in quite some time, Dan Duerst, the Worst. His channel link is in the description bar below. Anybody who wants to take a look, go take a look. Enjoy, and I'll see y'all either next time that I make a video or sometime next week with Impious VIR. Have a good day, guys.
Grab her by the pussy with consent.